I'm Elle Fanning, and I'm very excited to be filming. It's a new movie about the Nutcracker. This is one of our cool sets. It's a giant dollhouse where my favorite characters, toys, magically come alive. So come with me, and I'll show you more of my secret world.
You know, the creation of this film is a very, very long story. I started first working on the film in 1969. It was a thaw between Russia and the West, and they wanted to make a co-production of British and American filmmakers and Russian ballet and shoot it in Bolshoi Theater for famous British classical director Anthony Asquith. So we wrote a script with a famous Russian director and my collaborator Tarkovsky, and we were trying to do it as much as we could, and we were very interesting to work in the West. But Anthony Asquith passed away, and the film went to oblivion. And 20 years later, I started to think about making a film for kids or some fairy tale, and the idea came back. And action.
First time I read the script about 10 years ago when he first showed it to me. And even back then, I was really impressed by, all the visions and images, characters.
It seems to cover all films. We seem to be in a children's film, a musical, a comedy, and a drama.
Being a Russian, you grow up with Tchaikovsky's music and with the ballet. But it isn't the same story as in the ballet. So it has been changed a lot, and I think has become much more intense and interesting, and plot is much more complicated.
When you're analyzing the ballet itself, you realize that there are two parts, and the first part is a story, and by the end of the first part, the Mice King is already failed. There is a victory, and second part is just a potpourri and celebration. There is no story anymore. So in a sense, it was impossible to follow the story that was written for ballet. So when I start to think about film in different terms, I realized it should be just a fairy tale, and you cannot make a fairy tale with big chunks of tons. So then we return to the source where evil exists, and Hoffman's story is much more deep and much more philosophical and much more interesting than quite poor story of Tchaikovsky ballet.
See that city? It was my city before the Rat King took it from me.
In any story, to make it interesting, there have to be a conflict. Evil forces and forces of good, then the story is interesting.
When I first read the script, I thought it was scary at times, which I thought was good, because in the old fairy tales, the Grimm fairy tales, they were frightening.
The classic fairy stories, of which this is one, always have a really scary character.
Seems that your precious prince has left you all alone. Is that right, am I right? The precious prince has left you all alone.
No.
Hoffman is a surrealistic guy. He's extraordinary. He's one of the most prolific and creators of a genre that's called fantastical realism. And the style of fantastical realism is very modern. If you take films like Batman or Hellboy, it's a genre that brings you to the reality, but it's a warped reality. The stories can be pure fantasy like Frankenstein, but the details have smell. So in a sense, it's a combination of very real details and very fantastical events. So we followed that pattern to make a fantasy that can be acceptable for those who love Tchaikovsky, for those who don't know Tchaikovsky, and also for kids.
Let's see the last one. What's the one we like? We don't like any of those. That's it. You understand?
I voted for the
Charlie,
last one.
Max, L, and Totoro united. You don't use that thing?
We all voted
I mean,
for the
yeah.
last one.
The last one is good. And let's say we don't see that, we made your problem. We're sticking together, we're unionized.
I have seen the Nutcracker ballet about 3 times, but it's completely different to this story.
It's certainly an unusual take on the Nutcracker.
Which I suppose the analogy is that it's a kind of fascist state, really.
It's very interesting for me to explore the totalitarian mentality and to make it accessible for those who don't know it anymore. It was improvisation on Hoffman theme, but I think I was very close to the idea of original Hoffman story.
The biggest fundamental change is that the Mouse King has become the Rat King.
I cannot imagine mice as embodiment of evil. Mice is such a charming little creature, and it's not by accident Mickey Mouse became an absolutely universal hero. So then the idea of another rodent came, right away, a rat. Many reasons to make rat. First of all, rat is repulsive. Second, semantically, rat is a kind of insult. Mice cannot be insult. So even on a language level, rat is something that is menacing and powerful as an image. And thirdly, rats infesting the city. It's an image of 20th century. The famous novel of Camus, The Plague, when rats is a metaphor for Nazism or for fascism. So rat has such a rich connotations in European culture that was, it was asking itself to jump on the screen and replace the mice.
There's something really beautiful about this story. I feel like it's really from a child's imagination.
I can't believe it. You did it.
Which is kind of classic. And there's a reason why some of those things last.
What do you mean? I mean, I've been waiting for someone who believed like you.
I think the most important part of what I can now understand, because I didn't understand it when I was writing it or shooting it. We start the film with the reality, with the real world. We start the film through the eyes of this girl, and then slowly and imperceptibly for the audience, we enter into total fantasy.
Mary!
Usually fantasy goes woo, and then there is a cut, and there is a fantasy world. But this transition is imperceptible.
Are you all right? What happened?
But returning from the fantasy is a shocking thing because she wakes up. It's boom. And that's, I think, very important for perception of the film. So you lead the audience through the corridor of reality, and then you get entangled in more and more fantastic and unbelievable events, but you don't perceive it as not believable.
It's really smartly done in a way because you have a child and reality, and when we cross this border between the reality and her imaginary world, we see the same characters.
I had to cast actors that be able to be eccentrics and at the same time very touching. Visual effects are very expensive things, but the most expensive visual effects is human face. If human face is not transmitting the emotions, we can lose the story.
I like doing the character, but I'll be glad to take the makeup off. I'll just keep the wig and I'll have a talk show.
Mary is a pivotal character. Most of the film is told from her point of view. She is the eyes through which we look at the world. That's why it's so important to have an actress that is so perceptive and so refined in her emotions.
She loves her parents so much, but because they leave her in the beginning, she sort of feels, what if they don't love me?
If from the beginning parents were caring and attentive and understanding everything, then there is no story really.
This is about miscommunication between parents and children, and Mary suffers and she lacks certain intimacy in the relationship, and she is sublimating it in some fantasy, and she creates a substitute for parents.
She's just a sad kid, like most kids when they get aroused with their parents.
All right, enough! Everybody get to bed.
The father is very formal and remote and very strict with the children. So Mary, played brilliantly by Elle Fanning, going into this fantasy world is the logical way out for a child to escape that domestic ice station, really.
The character of Mother, well, she's a diva. I have to defend her. I'm an actor who defends my characters. And I don't think she's that selfish. She's an artist, and there is, unfortunately, very little space left for her children.
Louise, we really need to get going.
You really have to, Mother.
We already went over this, Mary.
But it's Christmas, and everybody should be together.
Their parents are rather self-involved people. They don't quite know how to relate to the children and really don't allow them to be children. So Uncle Albert, I think, is filling that role.
What's the matter, sweetheart?
I wanted you to help me make them stay, but you weren't here.
He's fun. He encourages their imagination. And he's a very nurturing parental figure to the kids. He's not necessarily Albert Einstein, but he certainly could be, but it's all relative.
Max is a typical boy who wants to dismantle everything and to understand how it works.
Max, put her out! Please don't tell me, Mary.
Boys in the age of 7 or 8 are destructive. They want to break something in order to build.
My character is supposed to be a kid who's not really nice, and he likes breaking toys.
That's good.
He likes seeing her get into trouble because he gets into trouble a lot. That's what I would think.
She loves Max, and she hates Max because he breaks everything that he comes into. I mean, he breaks the Nutcracker, and that's just awful for Mary.
I would be very worried if my boy, who is 7 years, was sitting in the corner constructing something or learning. He should run around and hit things. And it doesn't take anything from my frustration, but it's normal. At the beginning, he was slightly frightened and wasn't at all Max. But after 2-3 weeks, rubbing shoulders, he became unbearably Max.
This is our school.
The Rat King is a wisecracking, jazz-loving show-off. Ultimately, probably his greatest character flaw is his narcissism.
Andre said something early on that he's really a performer. And so I did a lot of work with Stuart Hopps, the choreographer. I tried all different things. You know, I looked at some Rat stuff, but I felt it would be really limiting to be just, you know, so I just kind of work it in at certain times. I played Arturo Ui in the theater, and that's kind of Brecht's version of Hitler, and that actually is helpful when you do something like this, because I'm playing a guy who's kind of a king, who's a wannabe, you know, demagogue. A lot of these guys who are dictators, they're actually, you know, quite weak internally, you know, and this guy's kind of a mama's boy.
Mother! Mother!
Oh, it's only you. I played his mother. She's the queen rat, old lady rat. I don't know how old that's supposed to be, ancient, I think, but she seems to wear makeup as well, and a series of wigs.
The Rat King's mother, who is essentially also his sidekick, is a distinctly alcoholic, rather dysfunctional lady rat who, through laziness rather than disability, occupies a wheelchair much of the time. It's not that she can't walk, it's just that she won't walk.
We're a strange hybrid of rat, person, creature, because we're minus a few rat features. So it was a bit of an experiment, but it seemed to be very interesting, the little bits that I saw on the monitor.
And against the rats are pitched the combined might of a talking chimpanzee, a small boy that can play a drum a bit, juggling clown, and the Nutcracker himself.
There's Gilgud, Tinker, and Stick. Allow me to present our new owner, Mary.
The pleasure is all mine.
I think there's quite a close bond between them. And I think Mary actually sees both sides of him. You know, when the prince is there, he's trying to be all proper. But when Mary's there, you know, he lets that drop a little. And he's the one that actually takes her through into the other world. He's the one that bridges the gap between the two worlds. And I think that's why he actually takes on quite a protective role.
Good shot.
I play the Nutcracker. Well, the Nutcracker when he's the prince. She cares about me, but I don't care about her feelings. I think I'm the one that affects her because I don't listen to anything she says.
That was the evil Rat King, who tried to turn off our sunlight. It's been a long journey home.
That's good.
The music, despite the fact that it's adapted classical, it's just alchemy.
We started work 15 years ago. The first numbers he wrote, it was 15 years ago.
Когда мне Кончаловский предложил эту идею, этому мюзиклу, я так сначала даже отказался, потому что я понимал, какую там бешеную работу предстоит, сколько надо материала перелопатить, и время, и все такое прочее. Но он проявил здесь как замечательный воспитатель и учитель. Он говорит, ну, я тебя же так вот, просто помоги мне там подобрать. Ну, а потом я втянулся и поехал.
I didn't want to distort or to warp or to diminish the beauty of Tchaikovsky's music. So in a sense it was very creative. The composer's work was extremely difficult and very delicate. And Artemiev used his skill of classical composer to work on Tchaikovsky's themes.
Вот. Но это было глубоко. Вот так я могу сказать, что я раньше Чайковского не знал. Вот теперь могу сказать, что знаю, наверное, могу так сказать. Потому что я заново все переслушал, не только, но с партитурами в руках, там, монтируя, понимая, как это одно поставить другому.
So we start to think how the Tchaikovsky themes can be transported to different characters. Some music in the ballet, especially, for example, the battle between Nutcracker and his army with mice, is not very frightening. So we had to think about which theme from Tchaikovsky's music can be applied to that situation and change the character.
Скажем, у нас в самом балете не хватало музыки, ну, отрицательного, что ли, персонажа, короля. Я просто там у Чайковского не было таких задач. Это праздник, детский праздник с небольшим сном таким и счастливый конец. Это такая музыка счастья. Вот. А нам нужно было найти какие-то злые, так сказать, интонации злодея. Но вот я вспомнил, так сказать, вот шестую симфонию Чайковского, третья часть Скерца, вот где как раз там силы зла. Это, значит, вот я предложил Кончаловскому это сделать, он за эту идею так ухватился. Вот мы...
I would not have believed that you could get jazz from Tchaikovsky and still have it recognizable, but you can. I know, I've listened to it many, many times.
2, 3, 4.
Welcome to a Stygian era. Darkness wearing rodents seem much clearer.
Поэтому стилистика менялась. И менялась в силу изображения. То есть не то, что мы так, давайте попробуем так, эдак. Потому что даже король у нас явно где-то такой персонаж, он и трагикомический, и комический, и злодей, и вместе с тем смешной. И нам показалось, что лучше его решать, так сказать, в духе диксиленд-мюзики, музыка диксиленда. И вот так в этом духе он так нас...
I thought that if we gave lyrics to the music, it would appeal to people who weren't necessarily classical music fans.
My name is Tim Rice. I'm writing the words for the songs in the Nutcracker with my latest collaborator, Tchaikovsky.
Nobody's listening.
not even trying. They simply say, come what may, I'm lying. I can't believe that I actually got to sing the words that Tim Rice wrote. I mean, that's just amazing.
The key thing is to have somebody who is able to put over a lyric, somebody who can really act it superbly. That's almost more important than being a great singer.
Anything else? No. Any other ideas? No. Crazy ad-libs you want me to throw in?
But the great thing about Tchaikovsky is that he never rings up and complains. All the other composers I've worked with have rung up and said, where are the lyrics? And or else they've said, those are no good. Tchaikovsky, he's been fantastic. He's never once had a go at me.
Fantasy comes and goes, black is white, day is night, so you might turn your highs to lows. Up is down, pink is in is out, whisper, shout, says no doubt, it's all relative.
Except
Relative.
what makes
Relative.
us what
Relative.
we are, that's love.
It's not very popular now in the filmmaking to have a cultural associations. When I say cultural associations, I mean knowledge of the period that the film is talking about. I could have put it in completely abstract world. Very often fairy tales are in abstract world. I wanted to make it very smelly, and it should smell 20s.
The look of the film was kind of established in pre-production. I mean, that was all, part of getting the money together to do the movie, and for Andre to visualize the whole film and how the colors are going to work through the film.
Style, being beginning of the 20th century, I think it's fantastic. Is even more interesting because it gives this certain feel, Klimt, Art Deco and all that. I think it works beautifully for the image.
Of course, the story was transported into the 20th century, and the 20th century was extremely rich aesthetically. So in that sense, I wanted to make this aesthetics felt in the film very strongly, because it's very beautiful. I know that most of the people won't have a lot of cultural association with the big artists of 1920s. It doesn't matter. It's just beautiful.
This room was like a kind of showroom in a way for the family. It's a kind of, it's a formal room where they would entertain their guests. The room's dominated by the wall paintings. I looked at Klimt's paintings, and some of these are, inspired by his Beethoven frieze, and there's a couple of, quite well-known Klimt images here. And at the far end of the room, we did a painting of Julia, who plays the mother and then the fairy in the magical world. And the fireplace is there's a little glimpse into the rat world there in terms of its colour and its styling.
Voila.
The Doll's House was an absolutely marvellous opportunity, again, from a design sense. We drew and designed both houses at the same time, i.e. the miniature Doll's House and the one that we were going to build full size. We match the paint finishes and the graining of the wood and how the mitre joints of mouldings didn't quite meet. And so any kind of mistake or inherent kind of design thing in a miniature Doll's House was then magnified up and recreated at the full size.
Did you make all the furniture for it too?
Yes, it was all made.
It's exactly like my house, except drawing rooms here. And there's another one here, and then there's a kitchen conservatory, and that's it.
The story of the film takes place only over about a 2-day period, Christmas Eve and Christmas Day. But there are flashbacks to points in the past which require us to have some of the exteriors in different seasons.
I've designed complete buildings and the complete city. I'd already had to budgetarily introduce build lines where I thought above a certain height is going to be post-production CG work, and below that line is physical. And then Nick Brooks came on. We've had to form, of course, a very close working relationship and very integrated approach to the whole film to make these shots work. started off with a magical Viennese environment. And then in the course of the film, we have about 4 or 5 different setups there. We have, of course, the spring, perfect, beautiful, bucolic spring day. Then we have the winter look, which was our beautiful city, but this time in a winter mode. So snow, all the shop windows, the houses all full of Christmas decorations, Christmas lights. You know, it's a really beautiful look. We've got our orchestras, our trolley buses, marching bands, horses and carriages. And the central square is dominated by this 65-foot tall Christmas tree covered in snow, lights, Christmas decorations.
The world we're in now, the nice part, is all Christmas trees and fairy lights and magic and beautiful music. For us, it feels like we're in 2 films, because we did the rat stuff first and then the good world was second, but in fact they interconnect all the way through.
Then we have the invasion of the rats, so then we put the rat tower in. We called it the 10 minutes after the rat tower emerged look. Then we had the 6 months after the rat tower had emerged look, which by that time it was a very polluted city. It had been raining ash and soot. It was just before a sort of election, a shoehorn election of the Rat King. So it was completely covered with propaganda posters, vote Rat King, ratification, and in Rat We Trust, all these kind of slogans, and the whole city is absolutely covered in posters and posters on top and in layers of dirt, and all the buildings were massively aged down and kind of polluted. We're sitting at present on the remnants of the Rat Palace. This was probably about 5 or 6 weeks to build. Really played with the metal finishes. You know, Andre encouraged me to go dark, and so it's basically a black set, but within the black there's lots of steel colours.
I wanted to make a plausible retrofuturistic machines and all mechanics.
It's almost like industrial structures which you would find in the Industrial Revolution.
I went for a very heavy sort of historical industrial look. Looked at a lot of Victorian engineering, lots of riveted, heavy sort of steel plate construction. And the whole idea about the rat world is that everything is mechanized and everything has a mechanical sort of articulated component. And when we first see the rat towers, they actually emerge from the ground. They burst as kind of concertina mechanisms, and they sort of explode from within, and dong, 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 dong. The pieces kind of erupt from the ground. And then when I came to design the interiors, I wanted to somehow express that idea of articulation. So we see lots of enormous pistons, and we see evidence of cogwheels and tracks and oil and grease. So you can actually believe that the whole palace could actually fold down on itself and compress and retract within the ground from whence it came.
The rat set designs are just completely bleak, really. They're just black, sort of monolithic, dark place where madness sort of ensued.
I always say to the people I work with, they're boys' sets. All they are is dirty metal, pipes, tubes, bulkhead lights, all horrible boys' things.
See that cloud there? It was my city before the Rat King took it from me.
To quote the Rat King, he wants to bring a little grey into people's colourful lives. That's one of his aims. And there is this whole issue of how do you create clouds of smoke up in the air which blot out the sun. That's his plan. That's his master plan. The problem is our backlot is built outside. We're shooting in Hungary in the summer months. And if we had photographed the town square in normal summer light, it would have looked sunny. Doesn't matter what you do with it, doesn't matter what computers you have, you cannot change a sunny scene into a grey, overcast scene. It's just not possible. And I talked to Andre about it, and I said, I really think the only way we're going to make this work is we have to shoot at night, but then to get hold of something that we've been using now for about 5 years, which are extremely large balloons, rather reminiscent of airships, which hover above the set. And you do this by filling them with helium. Helium being an inert, safe gas that will not explode, that is much lighter than air, and consequently actually will lift very heavy lights inside of the balloons. But the effect of this was to cover the whole set in this downcast light. What we also did in the laboratory was we took away a lot of the colour. We actually applied something that in technical terms you would call 25% desaturation.
So we start off, being warm and full of sun and life and colour and stuff. And then we go bang into this kind of completely grey world.
I'm very happy with it. It wasn't an easy solution for people. People had to work all the way through the night. It's expensive to have these balloons. I think it was a wise decision by the producers. I think it's going to be a central image core to a rat world.
Some of the technology of the rat world is kind of impressive and beautiful. My favourite's probably going to be the bikes.
Look at these machine guns! Awesome hardware! Can I drive?
The designer and the supervising art director were going through various concepts. They found reference material for a bike called a Nutcracker. It was very distinctive. It had a central hub steering system and a front mudguard which looked almost like a cobra's hood. That as a basis, some of the concept artists did some work which was shown to the director. After that stage, I was brought on board to make the artwork into a real finished product. The engine is from a mid-sized Honda commuter bike. Anything larger and the bike would have become too big and we wouldn't have been able to realise the design because we have to put all our cladding around that.
We probably did more drawings of rat bats than any other character. We gradually came round to the idea that they weren't specific creatures, they were actually the rats in the film, dressed up in this kind of bizarre, ratty technology flying suit.
Yeah, so we've got 6 flying rat bats that have fiberglass wings and harnesses that were built on American football suits. And we have 2 stunt suits for flying rigs. The difficulty is keeping the weight down. It's got to look like a metal, sort of industrial sculpture, almost like plane wings, obviously folded in. But of course, we're trying to make it as light as possible because it's got to be worn by somebody.
Sorry, too long.
I wanted to have a film that has gimmicks and technical robotic devices that had an idea of retrofuturistic aesthetics. I mean, people always dreamt about some futuristic mechanism, starting from Jules Verne or even Leonardo da Vinci. So we made kind of steampunk aesthetic that this dog has an engine that works on steam. I told the designers that I don't want a sleek movement of the dog. I said to them that 2 parts of the body should be joined as 2 platforms of the train. It's like this. And that movement is not animalistic, it's very mechanical. So the butt of the dog is always late, and more it's clumsy, more it's believable.
Keep it lively, actually. Don't get too static with it.
Okay.
This is almost like a Victorian steam engine, sort of turned into a dog. The inner structure I had to build, it's a whole aluminium frame, which we call the 5-rudder, which allows the neck to move individually from the head, so you get quite fluent, lifelike movement. I did all the ligaments, everything, the whole dressing inside. A sculptor did the actual shell which you see, which actually shapes the dog. Then I get the fiberglass out of the mold and attach it to the mechanism I built, basically. Usually I'm strapped into a harness with a big pole arm, clips into the harness so it can go from up to down, so it can hunch down, and that combined with the neck movement and a bit side to side with the body gives it quite a lifelike feel, basically.
Now turn to camera.
All off, thank
I
you.
just want to see if I can lose you a bit.
And this is very handy as well for CG reference.
flying machine, like everything else, started off as a series of drawings, and it was Andre who said, you know, it needed to be like an egg and it needed to have big legs. I mean, there is a tradition of strange vehicles in fairy tales which have birds' legs.
I took the approach that everything should be based in some sort of reality. Although it's a heightened reality, I did quite a lot of research on aviation of the period, and there was a French aviator, 1912, a Pescara, who was experimenting with contra-rotating biplanar helicopters. And then there was some amazing Alfa Romeo car styling from 1916 with quite streamlined forms with the sort of porthole shapes. So if someone was to say to me, oh, it's completely ridiculous, you know, it could never have happened at that time, I can actually say, well, look, wait a second.
All right. Andre,
Yeah,
we got something good.
good.
We didn't really want something that was completely smooth. We wanted something that felt like it was sort of steam-powered and very sort of retro in engineering skills, but very sort of robust and could do the job. We had to build a sort of 3-axis gimbal to put cast and crew on a flying machine sort of 20 feet in the air. It weighs a lot. I mean, the flying machine was like 3.5 tons without anybody in it.
I'm waiting for you to grab my hair. Okay, grab my hair.
You never told me at that.
Oh, I never told you. That's going to be our great moment.
We wanted to have several moments that are extremely visually frightening. So we made a lot of design of this retractable jaws, something that is very powerful and very mechanical. The first concept was inspired, I think, by Terminator, by this kind of robotic creature that has a flesh, but this flesh segues somehow into the steel or something very sharp. It turned out that we won't believe it because it doesn't have a certain physiological repulsiveness, I would put it this way. And then, quite late in the production, when we only finished shooting, I saw a big poster of a hippopotamus with open mouth and ferocious fangs. And I said to designer, that's how his teeth should look.
No cameras on set.
We have animatronics, we have puppeteers, we have all of the normal departments that a film has. We have visual effects, we have prosthetic makeup, we have an animal movement choreographer for the rats and the chimpanzee. I mean, departments that I've never seen before.
I'm working 2 jobs really. One's a movement director, and one I'm doing the physical doubling for a character called Gielgud. Movement director is because we have armies of rats, and they all have to be taught a movement concept of how we're actually going to approach these human rats. But then also, I've done a lot of study of chimpanzees. I've been studying apes in general, 4 films, for about 30 years. They're about 8 to 10 times stronger than a man in the upper body, about as emotionally stable as a 1-year-old child. And they've got an IQ of about 85, which is similar to some of my friends.
He tries to be a gentleman as much as possible, but if you upset him or his emotions come to the surface, I think he becomes an ape very quickly.
At one point he'd be the butler, very, very precise, and then other times, like when he's fighting or the action sequences, Andre wanted it to become incredibly like a real chimp, including quadruped running and the way they walk and, you know, the whole behaviour.
The facial prosthetics, unlike some of the hands that have different uses, some are background, some are close-up, the facial prosthetics are always close-up, so the work is meticulous and slow. 2.5 hours per session, so it's sort of mentally exhausting in a way.
The pieces are foam rubber pieces that have to be glued on separately, and then you have a skull cap, which has 2 massive great ears. First of all, it's glued on with special prosthetic glue.
The foam has been beautifully made, so it's very soft. Because it's completely adhered to the actor's face, it moves with him very well. So rather than masking his facial expressions, it's actually enhancing them in some occasions.
We're going to start putting the makeup on soon. And then we start a paint job. Now, this is what takes a very long time.
Peter is very patient, so he allows me to paint very close to his eye, to get the blending edges very close here, which is absolutely crucial.
And then, of course, there's a wig and sideboards. And once the whole thing goes on, as they say, you can't see the join.
Obviously, there are things called nutcrackers, which you find in Eastern Europe and Germany, which are generally quite ugly. Sylvain, our early storyboard artist, actually did a drawing very, very early on, which after all of the design work we did, we actually went back to. And that little drawing was the influence for what we have now. It's not meant to be totally cute and gorgeous. The joints and everything needed to look like they had a gap between them, or there's no mechanical manufactured joint. Because if you'd just done an animated character all the way through, you wouldn't have the sort of quirky physicality that this character will have.
There's so many degrees of animation, and character is possibly the most difficult because it's acting. It's not just moving things around and following the laws of physics, it's actually putting life into something in a believable way. And it was my role to take Andre's direction, thoughts, and then transfer it into our team here. And we had 15 or 20 animators who all had to collectively bring the character to life in a very sort of homogeneous way.
I think that's the thing about this film. At the moment, you're only seeing, probably not even 50% of it. With all the characters, all their faces, all of the expressions and the fingers and everything will be augmented in post-production.
And action!
What you see through the camera isn't the final Nutcracker. What you see is a step or a process towards the final Nutcracker. And it's obviously quite hard to visualize for actresses, for directors, for cameramen, even for me. We've been using JB, who's a lovely little 4-year-old boy, who is the same height as Nutcracker and can walk and talk and do things. And we essentially use him just to line up the frame and to help Elle with her eye line. It's always good to be looking at something rather than staring off into a green or just pure space. Whatever we do with the Nutcracker, whether we have a lighting model of the Nutcracker to show us how the lights work on a wooden Nutcracker, or JB as some sort of moving reference, we will take them away from the frame and replace it with a brand new Nutcracker. The only Nutcracker that we'll ever keep is a rod puppet Nutcracker. When you see all the poor puppeteers dressed up in green suits behind it, we'll be erasing those, making the puppet walk and talk and perform.
Oh, hello. All right. So glad I don't have to wear one of those green suits. Wow.
Yeah, they look great, don't they?
No, they look great. But...
They love me. We've done a lot of shots now where we use something real and replace it halfway through the shot with something CG. And this is what we use for that. It's like a trick shot. It should feel like an in-camera shot, and we're just using CG to enhance it. And it's obviously not the way
you prefer to do these things, but it happens to be the only way you can do them. Another thing that we've been talking about a lot is the vistas that we create. You know, there's a very traditional matte painting route for this type of work, and what we're using is really an evolution of traditional matte painting, where we're taking live action views and vistas and we're projecting them into space. So Andre immediately picks up on the word projection. So he uses projection for everything now. So, you know, when we're on a green screen, he's saying, Nick, what are you projecting there?
Obviously, there are thousands of visual effects in the film, but two of the most challenging sequences were the Christmas tree and the snowflake dance.
Did we get smaller, or did the room get bigger?
The problem there with the tree is when you want to create a giant room, let's say, it's not just mechanically multiply the dimensions. It's much more complicated. And the first mistake was in the wide shot, we put the full tree. And the full tree made the room small. So we realized that the tree should be never seen altogether unless we have a very, very wide lens first. It's kind of distortion of the perspective. Second thing, we better see the tree by pieces. Third thing, and the most important, it was very difficult to everyone, including me, to understand how structure the tree that it will be giant. And I used the metaphor of a close encounter. In Close Encounters, the flying source felt gigantic because it looked like hovering over you with the distorted perspectives like an absolutely giant umbrella. So I told them that when we are under the tree, it should look like we're under UFO. So it's an enormous distortion of perspective, first. Second thing, we had to make a condensed perspective from below. So in a sense, we had to create first the images of breathtaking height, and then we have to enter into that tree that has an enormous space inside. I can tell you, we finally realized that we could do it only a year and a half after we started that work.
And at that point, the gondola rises up, and then that kind of begins, you know, the magical journey. And
Mary and Nutcracker ride up through the branches to the very top on a gondola ride. There's a lot of geometry involved in working out which direction we're going to be shooting in and shooting plates to reciprocate that.
The thought of actually completing it and putting all the tree branches and the 1 meter giant baubles that hang in the tree and getting it done and it being on set and us being able to film it was just like, never ever thought we'd get there.
Once they get to the top, Mary joins in a snowflake ballet.
I wanted to make this sequence first of all shooting and show it in Cannes Film Festival. 2.5 minutes of mind-boggling effect. It turned out that we need about 2.5 years to get the result.
Andre was always clear that he wanted a section early in the film which was a sort of tribute to the ballet.
I wanted to have a ballet, but I wanted to have it not embodied in physical shape. When I start to explain it to the amazement of my visual effects people, especially Nick Brooks, he couldn't understand how is it possible to do. So I start to explain without knowing myself what I'm trying to explain.
Andre is a very unusual filmmaker. He has very simple taste and a very epic vision.
I would like to have shapeless figures that have a shape. We feel the physical body, but we never see it. It's just formed with the rivulets of snow. And, you know, like invisible figure that has some snowflakes stick to the body for a second.
It's pretty much in a place that hasn't been covered in visual effects. You know, a choreography, a live action girl dancing with beautiful ballerinas made of snow powder and crystals.
Any moving object, like a car going through the blizzard, has rivulets behind it, a trail. So once we get the figurines with a trail of some kind of dust, it becomes more magic. Let's imagine that there is a flying stage in front of camera below, and camera goes like this. So this already becomes not just simply a choreographed number that is on the firm stage, but in the air with an invisible horizon.
You know, we talked a lot about how a lot of visual effects can seem dry, and as he puts it, has no smell. You know, he wants things that don't feel like CG, that feel dirty and smelly and real.
It's easy now to explain because you have an image and you can see how it works, but it was very difficult to understand how we achieve it.
I had a funny dream about you. Yeah. You were like, I was your psychiatrist. You were saying, I don't know, I'm doing all these things. I said, it's good, it's good.
I always wanted to be funny. And mind you, I don't have great sense of humor. And I never made funny films, always wanting to make a film funny. This film has this kind of attempt to make not a comedy of situation, it's a comedy of the character. So a lot of characters there are quite funny, even the most evil characters.
Andre has his own way of working.
I think he's somebody who thrives on chaos. We don't know what's going to happen. He doesn't want it all so planned and neatly worked out. He wants it to be very alive, and there are times when he'll just throw something at you. And then sometimes he just likes to start shooting, even if you're not ready, because he wants to see what'll happen.
It's a spontaneous thing. You create a world that is spontaneous, and then retroactively you can analyze.
I'm sorry, Mary, but it's time for you to go home.
But this is my home.
No, this is only your dream, darling.
Then I don't want to wake up. Can I stay?
Every film is about humans. Even film about machines is about humans. So in a sense here, it's a story about human fragility and human perseverance at the same time.
It's been unique in my experience, unlike anything else.
It is a little bit different. And I also think, you know, with a good script, at some point you lose the control and it goes on its own. And I think it's so beautiful.
It's been really fun.
An absolute feast for the eyes. The sets, the photography, the costumes, just beautiful, every frame.
Nobody really knows, you know, what the hell went on in the making of a film. To try and describe it, I don't think it would mean anything to anybody other than the fact that it's like madness.
It's a wonderful end to our interview.
Hope you enjoyed coming along with me, and I'll meet you back here, Christmas 2008. How was I?
Excellent, Miss Mary.
Can you go back? I like it here.
Yes, ma'am.